Welcome to the Lawyer Life Podcast, where we seek to navigate our days with a little less stress and ideally a lot more fulfillment. In this season 3, we focus on advancing our well-being, personal lives, and careers, and hopefully we'll have some fun along the way. On today's episode, we discuss the foundation of fulfillment. Wow. We're asking ourselves, how can we avoid ego-based decision-making and work toward what really matters? I'm Mike Anderson.
And I'm Darlene Tonelli.
Darlene, we're on our 3rd season of this podcast of ours.
That sounds very, very good when you put it like that. Sounds like a lot of work so far.
It sounds like there was 2 seasons and now there's another one.
That's actually a lot more accurate. Yep, there were 2 seasons and this is the 3rd.
This is the 3rd one.
It's nice to be back. We've done a couple of departure from our usual format episodes. We've done a lot of interviews, had a lot of great guests. And now today we're kind of back to our chats.
The good old 2-person talkie.
I
do like the transition of seasons when the seasons themselves, the real seasons just turned. It's fall now.
It is.
Love fall. September, I am partial to September. My birthday is in September, so maybe that's why. But it doesn't get its due, and I think it's such a great month. It's like, it's a start a new thing. Kids are going to school, or my daughter just started preschool. It's amazing weather. It's beautiful. Big fan of fall. I think it's important. It's nice to have seasons turn.
It is. Although it's funny as we get, I don't know, there's something that's happened all over social media. It's always like, it's pumpkin spice time. I'm like, I kind of remember a time when fall wasn't pumpkin spice time. Like, it's just one small component of fall. There's so many wonderful things about fall. But that seems to be the new way of
it's the commercialization fall of the seasons, Darlene. It's
I guess so.
We can no longer appreciate the natural elements. It's about what the corporations tell us.
You need a $6 latte to really appreciate what's happening here.
That was my NPR voice, by the way.
It was good. It was quite NPR-ish. Yeah.
Thank you. So to let everybody in on the secret of what the heck this new season is about, short summary is thus. We're going to do 12 episodes divided up between 3 topics. So wellness, personal lives, and career. We're going to integrate challenges, so basically we're going to put our money where our mouth is and to have some good takeaways for everybody, including ourselves. So at the end of every episode, we will issue a modest kind of challenge to ourselves and anybody that wants to join to, bring in whatever the topic is and whatever the thing that we're trying to improve our lives with. We're going to try to bring that intangibly into our lives. So we're going to have these challenges, and then we're going to do challenge follow-up the next episode. And when I say we, I really mean that Darlene and I will follow up on how we personally did with trying to integrate this new thing into our lives. And we encourage you all to join us, please. At Lawyer Life Pod on Twitter and Instagram are great ways to contact us. There's a feedback form that is in our show notes at all times. Let us know how we're doing. But generally, that's what we're up to this season. It's a very much focused season on bringing our A game and improving our well-being, personal lives, and careers. Yeah?
Sounds great. That was an excellent summary.
You're so supportive.
I think it's great. I mean, it's badly needed. I think one of the interesting learnings from the Lawyer Life Pod so far has been that we always have felt that we're not saying the most revolutionary things, but there's a little bit of this stuff just isn't said very often. So it's just not part of the common things that people talk about. And I do feel, and perhaps it's just because people now feel more comfortable talking to me about it, but I do hope that this opens it up so more people just kind of look at these things as key to their overall lawyerliness. So let's start.
The first topic is the foundation of fulfillment.
That sounds so deep.
It's a big,
super deep.
It's a big topic.
We're starting with a manageable foundation of fulfillment.
Well, it's less, I think, I don't know, in my head, this is mostly about kind of getting our priorities in order, because it feels like if, it's just like anything else. If you don't know what you're trying to achieve, it's hard to achieve it, right? If you don't take time to contemplate and to try to figure something out, then all the efforts thereafter can be far less productive. So I guess in this episode, what we're trying to focus on is like what really matters to us. And then once understanding what really matters to us, how can we change our lives and shift certain things to have more of what matters and less of what doesn't.
Right. And I think where this kind of started and why we felt this was the place to begin this journey is that the thing about this whole idea of wellness is that everyone kind of assumes it's got to be, you got to do something more than what you're doing today. I think people assume that. But I think what we don't spend any time saying like, where are we today? Are we really far down the wellness scale, or for us, are we okay? And I think that what we need to do is get really personalized about what we need before we kind of jump into like, oh, I have to add things into my day. No, hang on. Maybe you have to take things out of your day. Maybe you have to get rid of some things that you don't derive fulfillment from, and not always the things that seem extraneous, right? Like sometimes it's like, oh, I'm so busy, I need to drop my volunteering. Maybe not. Maybe you need to volunteer more. Like it's very personal about volunteer more, work less, or be with your family more, volunteer less. Like it really depends on the person. So let's jump in from that vantage point.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm interested in is like how sustainably I can encourage well-being in my own life. And so, the easy example is like everybody's talking about, go do yoga and exercise and eat well and blah, 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 blah. That's all great. But there's no point in doing that if you're like 8 to 6 every day is the worst thing and high stress and anxiety ridden and so on. I mean, these other efforts to try to like foster well-being matter not if the bulk of your day is a huge problem, right? So the first kind of step for us here is to figure out what are the things that we value most? What are the things that we're best at? What are the obstacles that are stopping us from engaging mostly in those things? And how can we do the things that really make us feel good?
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think when you're thinking about what do you value most, again, back to how everyone's values are different. Just being aware, like we talked in the episode with Professor Telfer about being aware of where it's just your thoughts versus reality. And this becomes very, very, very important in this exercise because, for me, whenever I have kind of made quantum sort of shifts towards things that are better for me, it's always started with this awareness of like, I know that I'm supposed to think this XYZ thing is important, but it doesn't feel important to me. It doesn't feel fulfilling to me. And I've got to trust that feeling. I have to go with how I feel, not with what I'm told to feel. It's just a very different way of looking at it. And I think unless you're kind of aware or have thought or maybe heard someone talk about this, you don't always have to stumble on that by yourself. It just is like, okay, do you feel good? It's like such a basic question, but I think a lot of lawyers would have trouble with that question. I think I did for a long time. I think I told myself that once you get through law school and you start your law job, it's a slog. This is a slog, and it will maybe always be a slog. I do think there's something to be said for in those first years making a commitment to yourself that there are some years in which you're learning that are difficult and that it's not all about kind of skipping off through the tulips. But I think when you start to accept that just because you made a choice early in your career to get training and you've accepted that as your baseline of happiness and fulfillment, that's where the problem lies. So let's say listening to this podcast thinking, okay, where am I at? I mean, what percentage of your time do you feel really good is sort of my first question. If the answer to that's 60% and 40% really bad, okay, that's not great. If the answer is 90% great, 10% bad, that feels more like a normal distribution of time. But again, I don't know what the ratio is for everyone. But for me, I try to work towards, there's going to be tough times. I think sometimes doing things that are more fulfilling are actually very hard in some non-traditional ways. But you they're more rewarding in some ways. So that's where the values come in. So just to back up, if we think about what the values are, knowing your values can help you benchmark this question of like, am I happy? Am I fulfilled? Because you can tell yourself you are, because you have these kind of like external markings or things that people tell you you should be happy about. But if there's a disconnect between those and how you feel, then you've got to go to the next step and say, okay, well, why? Why is there a disconnect? Because maybe my values aren't here. So if you have a big fancy job and a big fancy title, but you don't really value those things as being important enough to make sacrifices elsewhere, then you're probably not going to feel fulfilled. So it's a holistic set of questions, but first step is to ask the questions. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah, and I think first of all, I think that this profession has a lot of outside noise, and by that I mean, uh, you know, stereotypical standards of success and achievement and worth that are really loud, and that that noise is quite loud. And what we're trying to focus on here is like, what internally do you feel, and what are you saying internally? What drives you? And in an episode in our second season, Waleska Vernon had a great quote, which I think is so well put: that if you don't know what you want, you'll go for what others want. And
mm-hmm.
that really would be subscribing and listening to that outside noise, right? I think what we're trying to get to today is take some time to listen to yourself internally, put aside your ego, and find what really feels right for you, professionally, personally, and so on. I remember, like, one thing that drove me actually to make a couple career transitions, is that I just had a thing in my head. My parents were wildly supportive when I was growing up, and I remember, like, my parents would not only come to my games, but they would come watch my practices sometimes, like my high school football practices. I would look up and I would see my dad there, and I just knew that that's the kind of parent I wanted to be. That I've always known that. And so when it came to when my kids arrived, I started to turn my mind to, like, how do I get there? Like, it seemed like an impossibility, but I always knew that that was my goal. That's what I valued. I valued the idea of finding somehow in some job to be able to be a parent like that. And so that's not at all now part of the general narrative of being a successful lawyer. Like, nobody is saying that, oh my gosh, he is such a great lawyer because he's at his kid's football practice, at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, but that was something internally I knew that was really important to me. And that has driven me to shape my career in a certain way. And obviously people have different versions of that. But it is not easy to, turn the volume down on that outside noise and turn the volume up internally. But if we can start to do that, that means that we can get to a place where we actually are able to shape our career lives and our professional life, or our personal lives, in a way that we can get to a place where we're actualizing the things we want to and becoming the person we want to be.
Well, you know what's important about what you just said there is that you said you had a vision of what
Yeah.
it was to be a good parent. And it was something that you had early. That's really lucky, I think. And I think framing it in that way is important to people. It doesn't have to be like, I think when people are asked to sit down and identify values, that's a common coaching tool, obviously. But I think that it's hard for a lot of people. But I think looking at what do you admire? Really, what do you really admire? Even if you have a boss. I mean, I had a boss at my company who was a very successful CEO, but he was also very present for his family. And it was the stuff that I saw him doing, like leaving a meeting that had 20 people in it to take a call from his teenage kids, and just saying, I have to take this, even if it was mid sentence, always. And to me, little things like that were like, that's actually what I really admired. I admired that more than some of the other stuff. That wouldn't be true for everyone. But, I think looking at a vision, like seeing yourself admiring someone in your mind and being like, what was it about that? As opposed to, I value family, because I think that's very abstract for a lot of people. And lawyers are sometimes not abstract in our thinking. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. And
Did you have any?
it's such a big question that I think it's hard to articulate an answer to. And maybe it's just the way that my brain works, but I don't know, it's like a picture is worth 1,000 words, whatever. Like having that image in my head, I was able to kind of peel back the layers of the onion to figure out, oh, okay, to get there, that will require this and this and this and this and this. And so those are the things that I need to achieve or find ways to achieve or to get to.
There's another element to that, which is if you're a visual person, I'm actually more of, there's a word called kinesthetic. It's
Yeah,
like you
yeah, yeah.
operate by feeling. That's kind of how I am. Like if people say, what is your learning style? Like I very much learn from like a feeling. And some people learn from like an auditory, like listening. But if you are like a kinesthetic learner, then for me, I can think back to how did I feel in that situation? And what was really helpful in guiding me was that the places I could look at my career and I could say, okay, my job requires these things. So say there were 10 things on the list. And when I'm doing 8 of them, I feel pretty fine. Or let's say when I'm doing 5 of them, I feel fine. When I'm doing 3 of them, I feel bad. Don't like doing those things. And then when I'm doing 2 of them, I feel just lit up like this is my element. And so I think part of kind of figuring out your values or where you want to direct yourself in life is like, what are those 2 things? Like, what are the things that really you feel that this is the best use of your time and energy and talents? And, the more you can focus on orienting towards those rather than slugging it out to get better at the things that make you feel the worst, that can be another way of learning. And
Yeah,
then we
I
would
feel
need
like
someone auditory to talk to the other one.
yeah. But I
I
do
guess.
feel like it's a great point. I think whether you're at work or at home or just by yourself, there's nothing better than doing something that you value and you're really good at, right?
Mhm.
Like having your top skills align and push toward a thing that you really value achieving. I feel like that's what we're all trying to get to, right? And it just seems like to me that's where you're most likely to enter kind of that flow state that is so good for work productivity and wellness and happiness. When you just happen to be doing something that you can dial into and the rest of the world melts away. You're so present, your focus is heightened, and the results give you like a lot of satisfaction and contentment. That's where I feel like you're most likely to find that flow state when your values and your skills most align.
I did hear once that a tool to help with this, and it may not be for everyone, but I think it's an interesting way to look at it and top of mind for me at the moment. I once read that if you wanted to really figure out like what your values were, and if you were having trouble with that as an exercise, you could write like looking back on your life, how you'd like to be remembered. And I think that what's interesting about that is that I think is an easier thing for people to do. Like I think people could probably articulate that a lot of the time, or in sitting down to think about it. It really does help you kind of get your values and the things you want to focus on in order. And then the other thing I would say is that the truth is, whatever your job is, whatever your day to day is, that like the truth of who you are and what you're great at will be what you're remembered for. Like whatever you were doing, it's like your true personality is going to be the stuff that like the real people around you kind of zero in on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of this that will happen, but then you kind of think, well, what more could have happened if you thought of these things earlier? So I think it's a very powerful exercise, one worth spending a bit of time on. And then, maybe you have 10 values or 4 or 1, right? Like there's room for some movement.
One of our earliest episodes in season 1, I mentioned this training I did by this company named Tignum, and it was about sustainable high performance. One of the things they have you do off the top is write a statement about like the type of person you aspire to be, and it's statements like, I am the person that, dot dot dot. So I did find it to be quite a powerful exercise, and truthfully, like, I wrote it in a book and it stayed there, and really I think the best place for it to be is like on my wall in front of me every day. I think that that's a great way to start to understand yourself and your priorities and your values better, but also hold yourself accountable and prioritize those things, right? I think it would be having those sort of statements and thoughts in front of me every day, at least I know, would mean that I would be focusing on the things that get me there, and not prioritizing the things that are hurdles or distract me from becoming that, that person. So I think, that's a really powerful and important exercise. Agreed.
You should put that on your wall.
I
That
know, I
can be
gotta
your
find
first
it.
to do. Get it out, put it on the wall.
Maybe I'll write a new one, because that was like a year plus ago.
Yeah.
So I think that I will, and then I will put it in front of me, because it's great, and it's similar to the way that I had that vision of being the parent watching the practice on a Tuesday at whatever 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. It's another great way to have this, tangible thing that's in front of you, that can lead you to start making decisions that will best place you to be in a fulfilled career, personal life, so on.
Totally.
This is a lot. I just
very deep. It's a big one.
Maybe I just like. I think maybe I'm just totally putting myself into this, but I feel like lawyers, we do like to make things. I don't want to say too complicated, but we're definitely thorough. So hopefully this sort of conversation is pleasing to folks that are listening. If you're listening, hopefully this is like not overwhelming. I don't, that's the thing that we never want to get into, is that, like, if anybody's interested in like improving their well-being, or, just trying to bring their A game in a couple places in their lives, this is, a fairly, lengthy chat with all this stuff that we're putting in here.
It's a good point. And I think that it should be, the point should be that at the end of the day, once you establish, like, really, I think it's just, if we can get aware that we're not happy or we're not fulfilled, and just be like, you know what, I'm not going to delude myself that I am, and I'm going to take small steps to improve it, for example. So I wrote we can link to this article from the show notes, but I wrote with a lawyer coach named Rachel Shipper, who will come on to the podcast, I'm sure, during this season. We wrote an article for Lexpert, and it talks about, how lawyers just, they know what's good for them in some ways. They know that they don't feel fulfilled, but they're so busy. And to take a minute out to just even take a couple of deep breaths a day would be an improvement, and would be a start. And that's kind of, I think that, yes, we can talk about the big picture, like trying to really get very, very, very honest about where we're at. But the starting point is to get a little bit, like, to just start and just be like, you know what, I'm going to take a couple of deep breaths. Or I feel badly about how often I interact with my family, and how sometimes I don't even see my kids in the morning, and I'm going to every day phone them at 4:30, and no matter what. And I'm going to block that time in my calendar, and I'm going to talk to them until 4:35. Like something small. It doesn't have to be an epic quantum shift. It doesn't have to be a change of job. It really doesn't. It can just be noticing and being like, it's okay for me to not say that this is awesome. Like, to say, you know what, I'm an amazing lawyer. I have work to do in some of these other areas of my life. So in this article, we use a wellness index that's pretty well known. And it talks about the various like elements of wellness and the things that add up to being a well person. And we'll talk about that stuff more as this season plays out. But it's broad. It's like spirituality, it's health, it's emotional connections with people, it's work. There are a number of elements to it. And if you just really think about where am I at in each of these places, you kind of get a more holistic picture. Because I think sometimes the thing that I see lawyers struggling with is, but I am great. I'm doing everything right. So I'm happy, right? Like question
Mm-hmm.
mark. Then
Yeah.
it's like, or I'm happy. I'm happy. Don't mess with it. I get that too. Yeah, that's good. If you've done that analysis for yourself and like that's okay, then everyone's different. But I think the bench line or the benchmark baseline that we're talking about here is just know, and from knowledge you get power. And in the article, this was a line that Rachel said, having done corporate coaching. She's a lawyer and a coach. And she says, it's easier to get a lawyer to buy a $50 water bottle than to take 3 breaths in a day. Right. And I thought that was such an excellent point, because it's like, yeah, we can throw money at a problem. Or we can be like, okay, good. I'm going to get my water bottle and I'm going to drink more water and not
Yeah.
do it. Like the $50 water bottle's in the bag. And how my feelings on drinking water,
Yeah, I
that
do.
really spoke to me. I was like, yes, I would do that. But it should
Darlene hates
feel,
drinking water for the new
I,
members of the audience.
it's a really bad thing. So anyway, in the health episode, I'll hopefully take that on as a challenge and see if my brain power improves. But anyway, yeah, it is a lot. It can be a lot. It can be a lifelong journey, or it can be just a slight tweak. So that leads
It's
to something.
We did the interview with Mark Sakamoto in season 1, which is a great episode. He said something toward the end that I think about like at least once a week, if not far more than that. He talked about like the natural rhythms that we have in life and how easy it is to, once you start spiraling down, to continue to spiral down. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what, or when you're spiraling up, to continue to spiral up. There's
Right.
momentum to whichever direction we're headed. And so if it feels like, even in small ways, you're not headed in the right direction, what we're encouraging is a moment to stop, acknowledge that, figure out some small things or even some bigger things that can help you change that momentum and start to spiral upwards. And then,
Mm-hmm.
there'll be great dividends and growth as time moves on. This episode is about setting the foundational elements for the rest of the season, so that when we get to conversations about the topics that you've outlined, Darlene, and more, we're positioned to be able to accept some of that into our lives in a more full way, I think.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
this is a heavy one. We would.
Good heavy, as people
I
say. Good
know.
busy. I'm good busy. It's
Yeah.
good heavy. I mean, I love this stuff. This stuff has been a real game changer for me in my life. And um, I think it really does just even out so many of the sharp edges in life. I think
Uh-huh.
it's just the start, to just be open. And to realize, honestly, that you're not open is also important. If
Mm-hmm.
you listen to this episode and you think, no way, I'm not going there. Okay, I would ask, why? Like think about why you can't go there. And then if that's the case, that's a whole other thing. So, and maybe if we get feedback that that's a common thing, maybe we can tackle that one. But anyway, this has been a good start. We're gonna try. What is our challenge for this week? Because each week we're gonna get a challenge and give one to the audience.
That's correct. So here comes this week's challenge. This week's challenges. Write down, and we'll post this on our various social stuffs. But step 1, write down 3 things you admire about other people. So like Darlene mentioned about her boss that would step out of meetings, that would be one that she would potentially write down. 3 things you admire about other people. Next step, 3 things that you value most in your own life. And finally, write down a statement, finish the sentence. I want people to describe me as blank. And hopefully that will start to set a foundation for how we walk through the rest of the season.
Awesome. I love it.
Okay. But don't go anywhere, everybody, because as always, we're going to take a break and we'll be back with our goods and grapes right after this. The Lawyer Life podcast is brought to you by Inter Alia Law. Inter Alia lawyers have big firm training, in-house experience, and a wide range of expertise in technology, media, and entertainment. Our advice is business-focused, speedy, and practical. To learn more, visit interalialaw.com. That's INTERALIA-law.com. And we are back with our goods and gripes. What everybody comes here for. Goods are things we want to promote and support, and gripes are things that annoy us. Darlene.
I do. I have a bunch of different things. I would say one good is, I may have mentioned on this podcast, but I am in a book club now that is not self-help based and not deep books on personal fulfillment. It's not the wherever you go, there you are style of book. It's literally fiction and popular nonfiction books. So that's been very interesting. I had my book club last night. I would call it a very good. And the next book on our list is, we read the book called Normal People by Sally Rooney, which was a pretty interesting book. And it was useful for me to just talk about something other than law or work or my children and just have that intellectual outlet. So, and to be forced to read fiction books, really, with a deadline, because I don't otherwise. But the next book is Bad Blood. Do you know this book?
No.
It's about the Theranos blood testing machine startup.
Oh,
yeah. But yeah, I'm only 75 pages into that book, but it's so far very interesting. So I would just say the good is getting outside of what I normally do and into a new group of people and just new conversations, stretch my brain, do different stuff. Yeah, good. How about you?
Well, my good is like the opposite. It is squarely where my brain is most satisfied and comfortable. And it turns out I just love Canadian female artists writing songs that are retrospective. I talked about Tegan. I talked like weeks ago about Tegan and Sarah releasing this album, right? They found these recordings from when they were in high school and they re-recorded them all. Yeah. And that just, for some reason, just makes me feel so warm and cozy and great. I just love it. And then Lights, who's another great Canadian artist who I've just admired her so much. She's so creative and does so many great things. It's been 10 years since she released her first album. And she released a song to celebrate that. It features Travis Barker, who's the drummer from Blink-182. Mm-hmm. It's called Long Live, and it's just like a celebration of what she's done for 10 years. And it's a great song. And it's just, oh God, I can't listen to it enough. It's so great. There's swearing in it. Just so you know.
Oh my God. We're not recommending family-friendly entertainment. That's what you're saying?
I think she's great. She's a parent. She writes these graphic novel comic books that relate to her albums. She has like hidden Easter eggs in her social media that reference both. It's just like, she obviously has so found stuff that makes her happy. Anyway, she's completely unique, and that song is great. You were going to say something.
No, I was just going to agree wholeheartedly. She's awesome. And I had when you say she put her album out 10 years ago, I had a little bit of a noticing time passed because I was definitely around for those days. And yeah, she's just, when I first saw her perform, I just thought, this is a really unique artist. She's just 100. I always look for the artists who just really are themselves and inhabit themselves so fully. She certainly fits into that category. So
Yeah, she played a bunch when I worked on MTV Live. As a producer, she played a bunch on Live. I shared a cross-country airplane ride beside her once. She was absolutely lovely. Anyway, so grape. Do you have any grapes?
We were sort of griping briefly at the beginning of this podcast because I was on a field trip yesterday with my son, which was lovely and so good to be there for him. And, I try to do those things, but I did find that it felt long walking around a farm without control of the schedule or like what we wanted to do together. So that would probably be, it's not a gripe. It's like just an awareness, right? Sometimes you build things up in your mind, and I had kind of built up, I think, in my mind that this field trip would be fantastic. And
this is going to be the best.
This is going to be so great. We're going to like trip through the fields picking pumpkins, and he'll just be so thrilled that I'm there, and he'll understand the cost to me of being there. And instead it was more like, this is great, and I need to just adjust my expectations for what makes it great. That's kind of what I spent the day doing, and that was good. Met a lot of great parents and met the teacher and all that stuff. So very good way to spend the day, but I was very aware of my my own sort of role in that situation. So it's a goody gripey, as we say. How about you? You have a legit gripe, I bet.
My gripe is about this bad dog in my neighborhood. So here's the situation. I walk my daughter to daycare in the morning, right? And the daycare is like, I don't know, 7-minute walk. So I also walk the dog at the same time because 2 birds with 1 stone. Dog loves it. My daughter loves it. Great. We've recently, I don't know what the dog owner is doing, but the dog owner stands at the corner every day at the same time that we're passing that corner. And she has a dog that tries to bite my dog.
And
most with bad dogs cross the street and are aware that their dog is not good with others. But this dog owner does not have that. I don't know. Maybe she doesn't acknowledge it or whatever in her head. And so with my daughter and my dog every day, I have to briefly cross the street to avoid Marlowe. His name is this bad dog, and then cross back over. Very gripey. It's fine. It's okay. I would rather be able to continue down the sidewalk I'm on. Anyway, that is my gripe.
That is a gripe. When you first said bad dogs, I thought there would be a story related to Rosie about how
Rosie,
up to no good.
Rosie. No, our sweet Rosie. I think she's starting to lose her hearing. She's getting old. Aww. I love my little dog. Yeah. No, she's such a good dog.
Oh my God. How old is she?
We don't know. We don't know because we got her as a rescue. So we're guessing close to 9 or 10.
Oh, wow. She's a very wise old dog.
She is very wise. Yeah,
All
she's
right.
so sweet.
We need to get more Rosie updates. We used to get those fairly regularly at the beginning, but we'll have to get back into that sometime.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Do your best. Okay, well, nice to chat with you. We will be back to report on our own completing this challenge next week, as well as moving on to our next topic.
That is right, and we will talk soon.
Talk soon.
That's it for this week's episode of LLP. Thanks to Inter Alia Law for presenting the podcast and to Nick Fowler for composing and performing our music. See our show notes for his website. Don't forget, we love feedback. Please comment in the review section or subscribe or like. We'd appreciate it greatly. That's it. Talk soon.